So, second part of this series when I'm attempting a repaint of this Zorki 4. Since the last time I took out the back door and I also took apart the locking nuts and also this tripod mount. This part has been sandblasted, so this is how a sandblasted part looks. This part has only been polished. I polished all the chrome and gave this very shiny look. And as a comparison, so this is sandblasted. As a comparison, I have some parts of the locking keys that have been acid etched. So this is what happens if you put a chromed part in muriatic acid or hydrochloric acid. So it looks pretty nice. I also have these two caps and the other locking key. Now I will polish these so that they can match the shine of this bit. Alright. Now, before taking the camera apart, obviously the first thing to do would be to go through the actual state of the camera. So what I'm interested in is how the shutter operates right now. This is B, and I'm looking at the balance between the curtains, so how fast the two curtains move. In the Zorki 4, now, as I mentioned a lot of times in my previous videos, I'm using an old CRT TV set, a small one, that gives me a visual image of how the two curtains travel. So it works sort of like the old machinery used to set up the shutters. But it works for pretty much all cameras with this type of shutter, except this one. So, I mean, it works for the Zorki 4 as well, but it can lie in the sense that it can show an even gap or an even traveling of the curtains, when in fact one curtain is traveling faster than the other if one of the speeds slower than 1/30th is used. And that is because, as I have previously explained in my last Zorki 4 series, for the higher speeds, so that's pretty much 1/25th all the way to 1/1000th of a second, the first curtain will actually pull the second curtain along. So even if the second curtain is sluggish, for those speeds it will work fine, but for speeds like 1/30th, B, and all the slow speeds, it might hang or it might move much slower. In this case, it is pretty okay. Now I have worked the shutter a couple of times because at first the second curtain had a squeaky sound, and that is the sound of lack of lubrication. Alright, what else? Well, another aspect would be the diopter adjuster. Most of the times when you adjust the viewfinder, the image shakes because inside there is a sort of a lens that moves forward and backwards, and the rail on which it moves is not very well machined, so there is a little bit of play and that lens wobbles right and left. Alright. Self-timer, obviously, I cannot test. I will after I peel off this tape. Also, I normally would check to see how well the lens mount is adjusted, so the working distance. I'm not going to check it now because I will do it anyway when I'm done with the camera. And last but not least, the light tightness of the curtains. These look perfectly fine. I see no light leaks, no pinholes, nothing. The material itself looks nice. The gap, I can't test the gap until I take these baffles out. I will test the gap for evenness so that the gap is squared. But from what I can see, it looks very nice. Also, the rails are super shiny, and overall the camera looks in very good condition. Even the self timer looks like it's brand new. Also, the chrome on the back plate looked very nice. So this is probably one very fine example of Zorki 4K that will undergo an... Did you hear the squeal? The squeaking sound? I thought I heard the squeaking sound. Anyhow, so it will go through a regular CLA, nothing major to be done. Obviously, I will take everything apart, including the shutter. I will open the shutter rollers, clean them, lubricate them, the whole 9 yards, as they say. But I will not be replacing the curtains because it's pointless. I will probably re-glue the attachment points of the ribbons. Those usually are a bit ish after all this time. All right, let's start peeling. Let's start peeling stuff. Now, this tape unfortunately leaves a very sticky residue that will make things quite nasty. See, it sticks to the gloves, it sticks to everything. It's a goddamn mess. Now, since the tape was glued on top of the old leatherette, obviously the old leatherette is pretty much wasted. I don't know if there is any chance that I could actually clean, see, this glue without damaging the leatherette. And I will probably not even try it. Oh god. I'll need a lot more gloves for this. Obviously, if you get this glue on your fingers, well, good luck getting it off. Okay, I will just peel the old leatherette, and I will use the leatherette from another camera to make a template for custom leather covering. All right. Well, this one looks pretty snappy. Yep, working nice, no problems there. try not to get any of this goo on the viewfinder. Now, while I'm fighting this bloody tape, as I said on my previous video, getting the chrome off by sandblasting is a total pain in the ass. I mean, it took me like a good 2, 3, maybe even 5 minutes to sandblast that little piece from the bottom. Now, sandblasting everything is going to probably take a good hour or so. At least with what I have at hand. So I have access to a sandblaster used in dentistry. Oh god, oh god. Okay. Alright, so I have access to a sandblaster used in dentistry, and that uses either 50 microns or 120 microns particles of aluminum oxide. Ideally, I think I should use 100. That's the dimension used for Cerakote, and probably it's a good dimension. The problem is that it's probably not strong enough, meaning that it was not designed to sandblast like big surfaces, and that's one reason why it's so slow. Now, until I get my own sandblaster, I'll need to make do. Alright, now in order to minimize the amount spent on doing that, I will not sandblast the parts that I already know I can dechrome through acid stripping. That I will sandblast afterwards, but it's one thing to just sandblast the surface, and it's a totally different thing to actually remove a hard plated chrome with the sandblaster. What I do know is that I cannot sandblast this. So this is pretty much, let's say the top plate is not the top plate, this is the top plate, but this is the top plate of the shutter. So on this plate you have everything is stacked on this plate. I can't sandblast that because, as I said previously, this is the one, that little bushing here will simply dissolve, and then it's useless. I will also not be sandblasting the back door, because the entire back door except this bottom panel is aluminium, or aluminum, and that will get dissolved. And I will also not sandblast the top plate, the top plate, because this will get dissolved, unfortunately, because that means I have to actually sandblast these two plates and the back plate, and that will be a lot of work. What I can dechrome by acid is pretty much everything, like knobs, levers, dials, this, the winding lever, most likely, I mean for sure, because this is for sure not aluminum, and this is plastic, so it won't be affected. Now I can't dechrome this dial and this dial. Otherwise all the markings will be gone. Those two will remain as they are, everything else will be black. I will also paint black the screws. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws on the top plate. There's also one screw here, and that's pretty much all that is visible. I will paint black obviously the self timer lever, the flashing port, the diopter adjuster, and I guess that is all. And that little screw that just fell off, I think it fell off from here. So from the flash compensation or flash synchro dial, that is pretty much useless, but I will see. I will try to put it back in its original position. I will also try to paint this little button that I did not paint on my last Zorki 4 repaint. I don't really remember why. I think the little button is held in place, so it's spring loaded, and I think it's held in place by some sort of a very small circlip that is super tricky to take out and put back, I think. I don't really remember. Okay. Let's continue with the disassembly. I won't be going through the disassembly very deeply because I have already done that in my Zorki 4 series, and maybe I will at some other point in the future, but it's not something super tricky to do. This is the only difference. Now there is a way, I have heard, there is a way that you can use to remove the winding lever without losing the tension in the spring. Obviously I don't care about that now because I will need to take everything apart anyway. As always, I will try to put everything in order and then put them in my bag of bits and pieces, I mean in my box. This is, if I remember correctly, I thought it was reverse thread, but it's not. No, actually it is reverse thread. So you take this apart and this guy falls off. Alright, then you have those 3 screws. These 3 from that bottom tripod mount, you can't really confuse them because they are short and chubby. Alright, and right now the tension on this has been released. And that means I can move ahead and take this top plate off. Alright, so this is the top plate. In order to remove this dial, you need to take those two screws off. Alright. This cover seems bent. See, it's at an angle, it's usually straight, like this. And this is how it looks, as good as it seems to operate on the inside after all this time. So a lot of old lubricants here, they don't seem dried, but and nevertheless. And now I should easily and slowly start to take everything apart so I can get to the next step of sandblasting. You have a nut on the back, take the nut off and the whole PC sink is out. Now when painting this, it's very important to actually cover this area, obviously, so we don't get paint inside that port. Alright. Now I could get away with not painting the entire plate, so when this is back in position, the entire middle portion is hidden, so I don't really have to sandblast everything. I could take some landmarks where the top plate sits, so pretty much this line is what can remain chromed. You can also take out this. So there is a plastic stopper here where the winding lever hits the top plate when it's released, and it's simply like a mushroom-like post that has a little circlip on the back. So remove the circlip and that is removed. Also up here a screw that keeps this little plate in place. Both of them will be painted. Now for the painting of the screws, that is something that kind of gave me a bit of a hard time the first time I did it, but now I have developed a very medieval system that actually works. So I have a bit of wood, it has some holes in it, and I will actually screw the screws in the wood. The last time I just screwed them in. This time I think I am going to maybe use this side and uh, put them in order. So top plate, front, back, left, right. So that makes it a lot easier to take them and put them back in the correct spot in the camera. And I will have these to put or to screw in that wooden block. This is from here, this is back, this is front, this is back right by the winding lever, this is horizontal adjuster screw, this is flash, cold shoe screw, and so on. As for this guy, it's not important how you take it off because it simply lifts. It's important how you put it back. I mean, putting it back will be the tricky part. We'll cover that when we get to the reassembly part. This also lifts off and you are left with one gear here that has this circlip and will lift off from that post, and also two screws here that keep this part on the back side of the camera. This is the ratchet that does not allow the film to wind back, or the shutter actually. And also you have three screws. No, you don't. Those are rivets. So that's about it. Rivet, 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 like a frog. Also, this one seems to be riveted, so they will be left alone. And they are also covered by this, so it doesn't matter. When I'm done with everything here, I think I will just put this cover back and maybe trace a very fine line so I know what is the boundary of my sandblasting, if for some reason I don't want to sandblast everything. Sandblasting everything on this plate also means that you will paint everything, and that means you will paint every little hole for all these components. All the holes are threaded, so you might have a bit of a hard time to actually screw the screws back when reassembly. That's why I think I will just leave it as it is. Trace a contour line and just stick to that. And before painting, I will mask the part that can be left alone. All right. So to not end up with another very long video, I think I will stop here because everything else is pretty much standard. Has been covered already. This is standard. The entire rangefinder assembly is like any regular Zorki. The synchronizer is standard. Slow speed escapement is standard. Everything is like any regular Zorki, Zorki 4 or Mir. So Yeah, I will stop this video here. I will try to maybe make shorter videos so people don't get extremely bored. And in the next one, I will probably have everything um, stripped and painted, or at least stripped, and obviously everything cleaned, and we'll jump straight back to the reassembly stage, because the reassembly is the trickiest always. And yeah, that's about it. See you next time.